Jason, is CMBA in there yet?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Busy. Yeah.
He's excited, ready? Are you feeling good?
Yeah.
Good.
It's got right.
I know.
Here's the money, man.
Only 4 pages. I didn't do a quick run through it. Done.
Not yet, not yet. Let's wait till we start.
You know, gets back to just we'll send dates around and figure out review. So, but I mean, it's gonna be April.
Yeah, that's fine.
So,
We also probably are gonna need a special board meeting at the end of March
oh, for the
for the decision contract, and then we have a few personnel things we'd like to throw on there. So just a real quick.
Yep.
I don't even know if we can do Zoom on that. Can we do Zoom or they don't encourage that or?
we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But I said, yeah, let's, and my plan is, well, I'll send like the survey and stuff out beforehand, maybe a week beforehand, and then we'll schedule the meeting whenever. But
Perfect.
obviously, spring break's done next week, maybe Gail and I'll talk the following week. And then we can get dates lined
Yep.
up and just get go.
Perfect. That
So
sounds good.
usually the meeting will take an hour.
Yeah, that's good.
People can zoom in, that's fine. I mean, I'm not my plan for the year, just because it's easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get 12 more minutes right here from Jeff.
Yeah, I saw anything I didn't check. Where's? Okay, left.
Curious.
Is that what all it was?
That's in every time we do a bond, they have to go back through all the assets.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Well, it's a huge good man, man. It's 20 years.
You're ready whenever you are.
All right, I'm gonna get one more minute so I hear from Jeff. So. You doing roll call since?
Sure.
Okay, no secretary.
Yep, I got it.
You're just. All things today.
Just, poor Tyler called me and I was like, second Tyler, and I'm like, oh.
I go, I think you got this handled, because I just almost gone in the ditch on a new road. And I just called, I said, these roads are nasty, just so you know, and she's like, no, you're telling me. Yeah, never mind.
I was like, okay, good, we're good. I'm like, okay.
So what time was that, like noon?
10 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Morning was not good.
Well,
Very nice.
the sheriff department, when they came out and helped us, they said they had like, I don't know, 15 or 20 calls like in an hour this morning, like all at once. They said there was just like,
I have a nice heavy car, 4-wheel drive, usually it's like, and it just started getting pulled into the ditch.
We had a lot of traffic coming down for the indoor girls. On these days. So
yeah,
that was part of it.
yeah, I bet so.
They had them all trying to get here at 10.
So cute.
All right, I have not heard from Jeff, so but I'm just gonna go ahead and call this meeting to order. Christine, could you please do roll call? No.
I was gonna say, I will,
Oh, is he
very
here?
slow.
Oh, wait.
Right
I
here.
was just I gave up on you.
All right, we're good. We are going to. We're going to do a very slow roll call. Josh, are you here?
Here?
Hey, Jeff.
Tyler?
Here.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Melissa? Here. Andrew?
Here.
That concludes our roll call.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion. Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda passes. Moving along, Travis Squires from Piper Sandler is here to talk about our bonding capacity. Travis, floor is yours.
Okay. You have 2 documents in front of you. Just trying to keep this relatively simple and to the point, although it's very complex when you kind of walk under the numbers. This first sheet, it says financing capacity and debt limit at the top. And what I'll say, this is more of our like snapshot in time. You just ask us today, how much can we borrow and put towards projects from our various funding sources? It's gonna be laid out in this worksheet. That's not the assignment we're solving for. You know, we're solving for a multi-year financing plan, which is what'll be the next document. So I do just kind of want to reference through a couple points, make certain that everyone's on the same page. And then we'll move into the multi-phase approach with the second document. So the first thing to note, you had some strong valuation growth, obviously, historically, although it's getting harder and harder, right, to grow 5 and 7% on 1.1 billion is harder than growing 5 to 7% on 600 million of valuation. So it's going to be harder to probably maintain the same clip of percentage growth, but you know, in terms of chunks of growth, I think you'll be good. Tax rate history, you're obviously lower the last 2 years versus the prior 10. So you're at the lowest rate you've had since 2013. Debt limit constraints. This is probably the first component where we really got to just snap into this reality that on paper I show you with a $53.9 million debt limit with $29.5 million of debt outstanding, so only a $24.4 million debt limit margin. You see that on that top line, remaining debt limit 24.4. So that ends a lot of facility conversations fairly quickly. But what do we know? Assumptions change. And this is our snapshot in time. And the debt limit is a snapshot in time, really each fiscal year. So if we just play this out over the next 7 years and take this out to 2029, there's a realistic possibility that you have a $71.8 million debt limit and a $57.1 million margin. So it's those set of facts that we're solving for when we get into the multi-phase approach. So how are we getting there? Well, if we grow valuations at 4%, and we pay off debt annually, your debt is going down at the clip of almost $2 million of debt paid off per year. And 4% growth adds just shy or right around $2 million of debt. So you're basically adding remaining debt limit at a $4 million clip each of those years. Now, again, this assumes no new projects, but you can start to see like, oh, okay, well, that's how maybe our financing plan over the next 7 to 8 years can potentially encompass $50–55 million of projects if that's your goal. The next sheet down or the next table down then is just your resources available. You're collecting about $2.8 million of capital project dollars annually between Pepple and Save. You got about an $800,000 debt payment that will go out through fiscal 30, and then your available after debt is about $2 million. So $2 million's got to cover all of your ongoing needs. So that's your technology, your transportation, your non-instructional software, your copier leases, and any kind of pay-as-you-go projects that you might want to consider in the summer. So that's where that's allocated. This doesn't mean that we can turn our financing plan loose with $2 million of debt payments. It's just not going to work. So then we get into capacity. 3 different buckets for looking at capacity. The middle bucket is one that when we get into the financing plan, the Pepple note capacity is not one that we're really exploring or contemplating, but it exists. And I'll talk about one reason why you might actually consider borrowing against that, or at least have that in your back pocket. But the general obligation bond capacity, so that's the voted bond, 60% approval. You have to go to the public and say, if we pick option 2, can we borrow $22.3 million or about $22 million worth of project funds and spend it to build XYZ, right? Indoor football stadium, whatever it is you guys decide you want to do. That's only tongue in cheek. Someone will do it. I don't even know if it'll be you guys, but and that really encompasses about a $3 million annual payment. So how can we afford 22 million when we're already levying at our maximum, right? You're levying $4.05 each year already. So then what we're doing is extending your debt and we're turning off the spigot on debt repayment. Because right now we're trying to pay off early your prior bonds. So that's how you're staying at the 405 levy. So we'd slow that down and have the ability to add new debt. So roughly 20-ish million of capacity there. Pebble note capacity, so your voter Pebble goes through 28. So you could leverage those revenues. So if we looked at just taking the 25 and 28 revenues and all of your voter Pebble, you're at about 3.3 million. No vote needed, no public hearing needed. The only thing you need to do is board action to move forward. So your sales tax revenue bond capacity then, so you're going to collect, currently it's about $12.30 per pupil. So that's resident students within the district. And so your leveraging of that, prior page, $1.9 million of revenue, you could encumber payments of about 78% or about 1.56 million amounts to your max payment. So then whether we're going 10, 15, 20, or 27 years, you can see 8.8 up to 17 million. So those are the numbers that we start with. The combination of those numbers, even if you take the max geo and the max sales tax, that only gets you to 41 million. So the task next then is to show, well, how can we get to $58 million of projects? At least that's I'll call it the maximum that I'm looking at right now. So any questions on this? I'll call this the snapshot of time before I say, now we're going to have to go into a little bit more of a creative mode.
You're basically just pulling off of general obligation and sales tax.
Yeah.
That's the recommendation. Yeah.
Yeah, general obligation, sales tax, potential surplus cash flow, and then investment earnings in your project fund is
What are we using today?
what's that?
How are we paying our debt back today with which funds?
Yeah, so one of your debts going back with the debt service levy.
Okay.
So your GO bonds, and then your sales tax, the debt is coming from those revenues. It's about 800,000 in your 1.9 million. And that will go through 2030. Your voted bonds currently go out to 2038. So your voted bond issue. And if we look at like your current payments today, are right about 1.8 million. And we're planning on you doing about 950,000 of debt repayment this year. So you're gonna pay ahead, or you're gonna levy to pay ahead about $1 million this year when we adopt the budget. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So let's go into this multi-phase approach. And so the concept here is trying to break this up into 2 phases. Because as I noted, phase 1, we just take the GO bonds and the sales tax, really puts you right at about phase 1 plus a little bit of cash. Right? So if I looked at option 3 on the bonding capacity, roughly 24.9 million. And then I also looked at sales tax revenue bonds, and I'm in between the 20 and 27 year at the 22 year. And then we look at investment earnings in the project fund. So based on when we sell the bonds and when you spend the project proceeds, that could be in the neighborhood of $1 million. If we invested it at 3%, currently you can probably earn 4.5 if we sold the bonds today. Now, historically, there have been many years when you've done projects and been able to turn around and invest the money at basically 0. But that also were times when you're borrowing at 2 and 2.5%. So we're borrowing north of 4 in these financial models right now. And then I'm looking at cash contributions. So that's the one that really is going to have to take some, squaring up of assumptions, which is on the back of this page when I get into it. So if we take this approach, phase 1 could be 45.6 million. And phase 2, I have calculated at just shy of 12.7 for a total of 58.3. Now here's what I'll say. The architects, when they put together their budgets, and they're a couple of years out, they're going to put a design contingency and a bidding contingency. So they might have 15% contingencies built into their numbers that they're giving you right now. I don't have a line item that says financing plan contingency. So if you want more contingency and me to back off the assumptions, then we can do so. And I'll talk through those assumptions down here in that bottom table. I tried to highlight the things that I think are relevant. And do note the phase 2 project, for example, we have it being bid and constructed between 2028 and 2030. But those are future value dollars. So a $12.6 million project that you're spending in the summer of 29 and summer of 30 isn't $12.6 million on paper today. You know, that might only be 10.5 million. So just know that I'm dealing with future value of dollars when I'm dealing with these project funds. So let's talk through some key assumptions on phase 1. So this could be a summer 24, summer 26 project. And these dates are important. You know, let's say you were able to bid the project and actually started in the summer of 24. And wow, I mean, everything hit it perfectly. We had, you know, late freezes, early frost gone, you know, everything was perfect for construction. And the contract finished in the summer of 25. Well, that doesn't work really well when in this scenario, because I have bond proceeds coming in the spring of 26, and we don't have the money to pay the contractor, right? So the timing of these projects, when we go to this multi-phase approach, becomes important to note. Other thing that I'll note here is this first scenario does extend your debt, your 405 debt levy out through 2046. So it would be accurate for you to go to the public and say that your debt levy rate is not going to increase because you approved this project, but what it is going to do is extend your levy rate. And I think that's just an important nuance in that discussion. With the motor PEPAL, we don't have any borrowing impact, but we're using the PEPAL for your ongoing needs. Your sales tax debt payments, you know, right now are costing you about 840,000. We're going to increase those by 715,000. So you're going to take on a pretty hefty increase in your sales tax debt payments. And then we're going to extend the total debt payment of 1.56 million out to 2046. Invested funds at 3%, with your cash contribution, the ability to commit cash and manage ongoing expenses. And we keep a minimum balance target on hand of 2.5 million. So we don't drop your fund balance below 2.5 million. That's one of those contingencies. You could say, well, why don't you bump it up to 4, 4.5, 5, because you have 5 right now, and let's not touch that. Well, that would be one place we can build a contingency into the financing plan. Interest rates, we're using about 0.5% higher than current rates and throughout the financial model. Valuation growth for the debt limit. It's probably the most important metric, at least on this initial phase. So we've got to hit 4% valuation growth for the next 3 years. And we do kind of max out at that 97% of your debt limit. Is that unheard of? No, there's many districts that have flipped up to 97%. Just know that as you go forward, the likelihood is you're going to pay off $2 million of principal annually. If you pick up normal valuation growth, you add 4 million to your debt. So it's really more of a short-term issue. Like when we get into phase 2, at the completion of phase 2, the highest we ever get on your debt limit is 87%. So the debt limit is really squeezed on the phase 1 project. Taxable valuations on our capital model, we're assuming you get 4% throughout, and that's really mainly just important through 2029. We're not talking that we got to get 4% growth for the next 35 years. We're just saying through getting phase 1 and phase 2 done, that's the assumption. Enrollment assumptions, this really only applies to the capital. It doesn't apply to your sales tax borrowing. But we are assuming 20 students per year. Actually, sorry, it's not through 34, it's only through 30, and then 10 students thereafter. So We're using some growth in there, and if that growth doesn't happen, it's just gonna leave you with less surplus sales tax over time. I don't see, this doesn't put your project budget in jeopardy. It just puts your ability to fund some of your ongoing needs. You might only have 600,000 of summer projects instead of 800,000 that you wanted to be able to do. And then we're assuming 1.5% sales tax revenue per pupil growth throughout the life of that. So those are kind of the key assumptions. So I'm gonna hit the pause button. Because I'm used to giving you guys like 45 minutes of this, and I'm just shooting the fire hose right at you guys and seeing how fast you can absorb this. But are there questions on the assumptions and the numbers that we have put together so far?
Yeah, I've got a couple.
Okay,
Okay, so over here in the tax rate history, on
Yeah.
the total levy. At the debt limit of 405, is there a possibility we raise that a little bit higher and generate more?
no, 405 is state maximum, you know, so that would require a legislative change to raise that cap. Unfortunately.
That's okay, that's
Yeah.
okay, that kind of limits us,
I
it
mean,
also keeps us in check.
yeah, you know, you've got two different things constraining you, right? So it's this levy limit, but then it's also the debt limit. I would certainly be in favor of there being an option for you guys to take it above 405. Cities don't have a limit. Schools are the only ones.
But we're not gonna accomplish that this afternoon, is what you're telling me.
No,
Okay,
legislative change, and I think it is going to become more of an issue if we don't see some reversal. Of what's happening with the construction inflation, so. And then everything that the state does on property tax reform. You know, has its unintended consequences, so if we continue to go down this route of. You know, limiting the ability, for example, there's a bill right now that's gonna limit the ability of even. Like revaluations of homes to mark those at only an annual 3% increase, even if they went up 15%. Those type of things will have potential future capacity limitations for you, especially as a district that's enjoyed greater than 3% growth.
so the next one I'd ask you, Travis, is the 715,000 we're using for sales tax revenue. Repayment, when is that paid out, if we wouldn't extend it out any more?
2030. You got 830 going right now, out through 2030.
We have 830,000.
Is your annual payment, yep, so on the bottom of this capacity, sorry, it's right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, fiscal 30 there, and you get the 830,000 payments.
Is it normal for people to use that for debt service?
That's kind of what allowed us to do the high school.
Okay,
Yeah, the component of the high school to get that done required you to go out on your sales tax, so at that time you were leveraged at about 70, a little over 70% of your revenues, but obviously revenues have grown substantially. Revenue per pupil, as well as the ability to account for your increased certified enrollment over the last 10 years since you were in high school.
So to Jeff's question about levy, the only other lever we would have isn't specific to building capital, but the community recreation, but that levy. Is that one?
That still exists, the pearl.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's more of an operational component. It used to be called the playground levy, so there are some things that you could do associated with playgrounds. So I don't see that as a leveraging tool though for you guys, but it could help backfill.
But other than that, we are maxed out on levy.
Yep.
I guess is the point, but that's one, I think it's a 33 cent.
13.5.
13.5, not even that, okay.
It's about a third of your board capital. It's
Yeah.
70,000 a
Yeah.
year.
well, how much do we grow? If we didn't build anything this year, how much would our ability to finance next year at this time be?
If you didn't build anything.
We didn't do anything, say we just move this down the road 1 year.
Yeah, so all of my assumptions assume that everything is borrowed as 24 as it is right now.
Okay, so
If you slid everything down a year,
mean, what are we accumulating per year for our evaluation of being able to borrow?
You're gonna pay off about $2 million.
Right, $2 million a year.
$2.1 million of debt.
And pick up 2 million in valuation.
Yeah,
right?
probably.
So 4 million.
Yeah, maybe 2 million, because you get one more year at it. So you're probably picking up 2. The reality is, you're probably not gonna keep up with inflation. So
So what we're gaining, we're not gonna.
you're not
inflation's
gonna
going
pick
on.
up. I mean, that's where the cheapest time to fund any project was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you had less bonding capacity, it was cheaper 2 years ago because you've had the 20% run.
So it's like what Tyler said, our binding capacity only changes maximum maybe 2 million, 4 million a year, but we lose a lot of that to inflation.
Yeah. It's not a reason to rush forward with a project, but I don't think the project's becoming more affordable a year from now than it is right now. Your capacity just doesn't chase it fast enough. So we found that. And that's my biggest concern right now in K-12 school finance is just that we can't keep up with projects. I mean, some of these projects that working on across the state, $19.2 million in Corning, Iowa, and they basically revamping a K-12 facility, and it's like that's a lot of taxes to accomplish that project. So,
But it also, I've done a very nice job summarizing, but if you look at that phased approach. You're saying that's all the way out to basically 2030, 7 years from now. And that 58 million, that's for the next 7 years, and at that point. You wouldn't have any additional capacity, so I mean,
your
that just,
capacity would slow down a lot because you'll have tied up a fair amount of your sales tax at that point. So let's go ahead and go to the back of this page on the multi-phase. So I wanted to take you into how we were just looking in general at the pay-go components. So what I've done here is in this top table, you'll see surplus, PEPAL, and save. And that's after you make your sales tax debt payments. So you see it's about a $2.1 million surplus that we're showing as we move forward. 2.2, you see it picks up with a larger like $3.8 million surplus and 31. Follow that in that first column there. And then what we've done is just taken what I'll call kind of a normal allocation of your copier, tech, software, transportation. Call those 730,000 a year, and then inflated those at 2%. And then we've taken building grounds and pay-go projects and said you've got 600,000 of summer projects and inflated those going forward. So those are the things that we're setting aside on top of funding the $58 million of projects. So what you see here then are some pay-go contributions. Roughly $4.4 million going to phase 1, right? That matches the number on the prior page. The cash contribution 4.5. That's the sum of that 3.8 million and 640,000 to fund the project. Again, trying to keep your cumulative balance on the far right north of 2.5 million. No new PEPAL payments, and then you see the new sales tax payments coming in beginning in 24. They increased by about 700,000 per year initially, and then it's showing a $1.5 million increase. Well, that's because the way the math works out, it's still the 700,000, but the prior 800,000 rolled off. So you recognize that it's $1.5 million higher than today in that 2030 or 31 because you don't have any debt payments in 2030. But the net effect that you'd feel budget to budget would be, our sales tax debt payments went up 700,000 and they extended out to 46. And so what you can see in this model is that, it's pretty tight through the next 10 years. But then once you get beyond that, in addition to the 600, 700,000 of summer projects, you've got $1 million of cash flow there. So probably have some ability to further leverage sales taxes you needed to. Each year you get out, 5 years later, you're able to potentially bond against the voting bonds again. I mean, this is no different than when we did your last project. I mean, we're pretty much right at the cusp, other than we weren't going after the sales tax, but your GO was maxed out. You know, here we've taken the sales tax, so it's a little bit tighter. So certainly if you wanted to back down assumptions, you can always do so. My task is to show you the max and then bring you back and say, if it were me, I might want to live with slightly more cumulative surplus, because that could be your quote unquote contingency. So if you backed off phase 1 to 41 million and didn't put any cash contribution in there, that would be an okay trade-off in my mind. And then, you know, phase 2 was getting back to 10. So if you had 41 and 10, you're still accomplishing a lot, and that would be without adding cash contributions and give you more money. Kind of set aside, prioritize project. There might be some things that, you know, aren't in your 10-year plan that, oh, well, yeah, we do want to build the transportation facility at some point, so why don't we just set aside some of this money? And just because we put it on here, you know, that 3 million could be the transportation facility. You know, it could be an indoor practice field, because with your additions, you're gonna eat up some of your green space. So you need, you know, more reliable grass to be able to have as much practice space as you might have had with 2 fields, because you're gonna tear them up and you don't want to take care of them or put as much into taking care of those. So I think that's a feasible project. I think you're gonna have to prioritize the projects, and my biggest component here is you guys have to stay in control with when projects are let and how they're bundled. Sometimes that flies against what I'll call best practice, because your architect is gonna tell you that bundling the projects together is ideal. Keeping one contractor on site instead of having 3 contractors working on simultaneous projects is ideal. But that might not work with the way that funds want to flow. If you want to push the assumptions and the amount and use a multi-phase approach, then you're going to have a few other trade-offs. And so they might just have to get a little bit more creative that, yep, you're awarded this project, but you can't start working on it until we tell you, right? Like, we'll be in control of the start date on this phase of the project. Or you have bid alternates. You guys are used to having bid alternates on your projects that, well, you know, we had a 2% valuation instead of the 4 we thought we were gonna have. So phase 1 has to shrink by 2 million. Oh, well, where was our contingency? Well, if you went to 45.6, you didn't have one, but if you're at 41, you had a $2 million contingency of cash sitting in the bank. We just want to manage your assumptions. And I can't tell you to be more aggressive or more conservative. I can give you the numbers and tell you where I think you might have some problems or pitfalls. So yeah, any other questions to follow up on that?
But we're not gonna be able to get them. If we do this in a phase project anyway, are we able to resource the funds and then assign the jobs later? Because they're not gonna hold price.
No, not on between phase 1 and phase 2, but there might be a phase 1A and a phase 1B. Like, you might have multiple phases even within here. And that's where you might be able to be a little creative on how you're assigning that contract. Might they not hold price? Yeah, it's
No,
possible.
there's no way.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a downfall of phasing them. You know, I mean, if you look at our plan, I mean, we're moving this office and the bus barn down there, and or at least the bus barn down there, and then this all goes away, so it's got to be a phase project anyway.
Yeah, I think there's some sequence of the project regardless, right? And you can accomplish it that, you know, you're doing work at this building and this building, and then, as I mentioned, well, maybe all that stuff wanted to go quick, but we need to reserve some capital spending for the summer of 26. So you can't finish everything as fast as you want now. All that being said, I probably have construction starting a year sooner than it needs to. So we're probably okay cash flow on phase 1. Phase two is the one that we might get 3 or 4 years down the road, and we thought we were starting, we're gonna be able to finish phase two in the spring of 2030. But in reality, we didn't get all the assumptions we needed, so that needs to kick back a year. Assumptions could go in your way, you might actually, in your favor, and you might be able to accelerate it a year as well. So phasing approach, the reason I put this in 2 phases is the other thing I wanna say is that a lot of these dominoes might all go together, right? Because the projects you're doing in phase two, like you can't be at risk that you go back out for another vote 5 years from now. And that, oh, now they're gonna approve phase two. So with Indianola, the project that we did was they have a 2-phase high school renovation. But they can do 70 million now, and the 30 million that's going to come is gonna be whenever the assumptions allow us to issue the additional debt. But they can't do phase one and not do phase two. I mean, you gotta do them both. You can't change your mind and all of a sudden say, no, we're not gonna do phase two. Or be subject to the voters saying, no, we don't like phase two anymore. So you would be able to vote all of this in one referendum.
Okay,
That's what I'm.
So your referendum might be $35 million of GO debt, but it's gonna be issued in multiple phases. But it could just be one project scope being sold. We just don't know when phase two will be. It could be a year later, it could be 2 years later, it could be a year sooner. But you can sell the.
There isn't a time cut on implementation.
There's a time cut when you sell the bonds. And I think there's probably, it doesn't pass the smell test, like, oh yeah, we're just gonna throw out 50 million of capacity and we're gonna do projects over the next 10 years. Well, you've got to be specific enough in what you're doing that a reasonable voter can understand what they're voting for. You just get some blanket authority for 50 million of projects that the board can do at their whim, that's not gonna work. So you're gonna have to be specific. And that's where, if it means that you're waiting 5 years to do that next project, then just make sure we're communicating that as you go through the referendum.
But we will have, you would have the funds there available to do that project when it was time to let it.
You'd have the authority, yes, and then you get the funds when your assumptions come true.
So
Clarify.
so we, just say for our example here, we say we want to bond for 58,328,66.
we're actually gonna bond for 35.
Yeah.
Part of that.
You're gonna bond for 35, you're gonna hold.
Oh, that's all of our debt.
Yeah, and you're gonna hold hearings for $16 million of sales tax revenue,
Okay,
and that's all you need.
Can you, to Jeff's question, can you walk through? So
yeah,
so let's say in November or September, I guess, could be September. We would go out with a $35 million bond proposal to the community.
Yep.
That passes. And if, let's just use this example you've got here. When would you start issuing bonds?
Next spring.
And that would be just for phase one?
Yep.
Or even a portion of phase one?
I feel pretty good about phase one happening, as long as you can tell me that you can spend the money through the summer of 26. If you're gonna get done in the summer of 25, then I'm gonna have to say, we're gonna have to shrink phase one or do a phase 1A, phase 1B.
so how do you come up with that time number? Explain that to us so we can understand that a little bit.
Yeah, so it has to do with the timing of the proceeds, and that's some of the details that I tried to save you from.
Oh, that's all right.
Right now, the way the financing plan is written, of phase one through the summer of 25, I can get you 40 million of the 45. The next 5 million, actually closer to 4 million. Not counting investments, right? So you're probably at, if I count investment earnings through the summer of 25, you've got 41.6. And so the remaining 4 million comes in the summer of 26. Sorry, I misspoke there. Through the summer of 25, you've got 41.6. The last 4 million really has to be summer of 26 project. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And again, back to the bond, if we were to go out in September for $35 million appropriation of a GO bond. Then phase two, you're saying you might issue bond when in 28?
Yep. 28 and 29 is when I have geo bonds being sold. And again, kind of the same approach, through the summer of 29. So over the 2 summers, 28, 29, you can spend 11.9. Actually, you can spend most of it. I'm just gonna chop off some of your cash flow. I think I have all of your proceeds coming in through the summer of 29. It's just a little bit of cash that fills the gap. So you can finish phase 2, I say spring of 2030, but it's really kind of winter, the winter of 29, 2030.
So now tell me this, if we go in and we do this in a phase. And we start our repayment plan. Do we get any consideration for not getting all the money right there?
I'm not sure.
Well, we say we're going for the bonds, we're gonna owe the money on the bonds.
Yep,
And so whenever the bonds are let, and then we get it, we start our process. We're gonna set a group back that, what'd you say it was, 10 million?
10 million, yeah.
We don't pay on that until the bonds are let.
Yep, not until the bonds are sold. Right. You've just got the authority, so then each bond sale then drives when you start having interest expense associated with it. Clearly, there's risk, right? If there's valuation reform or things happen. Phase 2 might be a year later, could be 2 years later. Right? Could be 3 or 4 years later, right? If they decide to cut all of our property tax valuations. And this is where, you know, the laws of unintended consequences. We kind of ran into this and didn't really think about it that much, but last year they changed commercial property that the first 150,000 of all commercial property pays taxes now at the residential rollback rate instead of 90%. So all of a sudden, some of our districts, that was a 1 to 1.5% decline in their valuation because of that law change, right? So there's things that can happen that could derail that are outside of your control. This is where you just have to work very closely with your architect. Okay, I think we're getting close to thinking we can do phase 2 or probably a year later. So they're going to have to get going on the drawings and move that forward. I think you can have passive drawings, but there's probably no reason to get design development going too hot on all of phase 2 projects until you're a year out from when I think you can let the projects. So, and unfortunately, you're going to have to listen to me and when I say that I think you can get the money. So
No, that's okay.
it's not as much of you know, our normal projects are like, yeah, just go build it, man. We gave you the simple approach, just go build it. We're trying to push assumptions and be a little more creative. It lets you solve a 10-year capital plan as opposed to just trying to solve for your needs over the next 2 years.
But in general, Travis, I mean, if you go out this 6 or 7 years, that's your best guess at our total capacity. With regard to the general obligation bond, you would recommend, well, if that's what you're gonna do, then do it all at once. Don't put those out in separate bonds. And we could, in fact, not just have a phase 1 or a phase 2, but a phase 1A and a phase 1B and whatever.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that's the next thing is I could give you an illustration with the buckets of when I have the money getting spent, right? So how much is getting spent in fiscal 24, 25, 26, 27, just so you can see how that works and we can work together. I mean, there's a cash flow underneath it, so I can send you a 3-page cash flow. But trying to keep
I wouldn't be all opposed to that, would you?
No, I think we need to dig into the details, but probably need to have a big picture agreement on what we're gonna do.
The what?
Yeah.
So just last question, I think. Something close to this scenario, and for phase 1 at that amount, you're saying that we should be looking at completing a project summer of 26. So the earliest move in would be the fall of 26.
Or if there's an ancillary phase that's smaller, I have on paper spending 40 million through the summer of 25. That's the bulk of it.
Okay, so yeah, and that gets to Jeff's.
Yeah.
Well, let's lay it all out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of what I put down here with the phases, so it's just the timing of the project probably is one of the key assumptions that's all tied together, but. all of these assumptions interplay, so. 3% valuation growth instead of 4. Could have the effect of slowing it down because I'm also compounding on top of that assumption for 6 years. So like missing an assumption in year 1 has more of a problem than, oh, well, in year 5, we only got 3% instead of 4. Well, it's probably not as big a deal in the total grand scheme of things. For your project.
When we raise our percentage that high, like 97, does that affect our bond rating?
It shouldn't have if anything, it's a negligible effect. The debt limit, isn't measured by the rating agency.
Okay.
They're gonna look at like debt per capita. They're gonna look at wealth levels, median household income, affordability of debt. How do you compare against other districts, your size, with your size budget across the state? And so this debt limit number at 97%. Doesn't necessarily throw a red flag for the rating agency, because they're comparing it against other states. That you being at 97% in California is only 50, right? So, you know, our constitutional laws create some things that limit you that don't necessarily have an impact on your rating. So yeah, it would definitely be an increase. I mean, your percentage usage would go up. Could it put some rating pressure on you? Maybe, but not enough to be concerned about. They're more likely to swing your rating down because your solvency ratio went from 20% to 4% than they are if your debt limit goes from 60 to 85. Which doesn't make sense, but that's
That's the way they do it.
that's their metrics, so. Because you and I would both say, well, that's more credit risk. If you're at 85% of your debt limit, then you're at a 4% solvency, which doesn't pay your bonds anyway. It's their metrics that they use for comparability that cause the issue.
So our rating on our bonds was what?
It's A+. A+.
And you think we can stay there on this stuff as well? Yep.
And even if you did drop to A and you paid an extra 0.1%, but you did the projects you wanted for your community on time and at a lesser cost. So that's a win.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Good question, Jack. Folks, should the CMBA people are chomping up and down to say, okay, let's go through this now.
Yeah, they're online.
Yes, so what I would say here is think through where you might want me to be more conservative. And if that's simply pulling the cash contributions out, then work back on those projects. Because it might be that you'd say, yeah, let's keep phase 1 a little bit lower, but then keep that phase 2 target that. You know, maybe we can do a project in the interim after we've seen 4 years of growth. So like in 27, and then maybe the entirety of phase 2 gets done in 2030, right? So there might be some breaking out of these projects where you say, yeah, let's take that cash contribution out of phase 1 and put any cash we're putting into phase 2.
You know, we could, I think the best thing for us, because we're doing multiple schools. We're not building anything new.
Yeah.
Would be our bucket.
Yeah,
And if you brought us a bucket and said, hey, bucket 1, we can do this school, bucket 2, we can do this school, bucket 3, we can do this school.
you wanna look at this is exactly what I got here. I got 7 buckets of spending here. Okay, so just tell me what to put in the buckets and when to throw them, and then we can see how your running balance goes. I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, I think that would steer us in some directions that would make sense long term. Because quite frankly, we can't do anything without you. I mean, telling us what's available, the availability of funds. And I think we owe it to the voters that we don't drop the bond rating, so that we do a level bonding. I think that's important. But yeah.
And ultimately, it's prioritizing the right.
Right. I guess the other thing before you go, if you could ship Christine a list of people that would be similar to our size and how we group relatedly to other schools going through this. If you have something, like if it's available, I don't stay up and burn the midnight.
No, but yeah, I mean, I think we had 15 bond referendums on the ballot this week, so 8 of them passed. Or 7 of them passed, 7 or 8, I can't tell on one, they haven't given us the numbers. So that's really pretty close, you see about a 60% passage rate. Christine and Gail are gonna see a marketing thing come out from us that just talks about those passage rates. I can tell you right now, I had a similar conversation with ADM schools last week. The same type of thing, they're thinking about a new high school. So they're gonna be out on their over their skis, just like you guys, trying to figure out how do we phase this, because everything became about 25% less affordable over the last couple of years. And if you go back 10 years ago, you're gonna remember this, Tyler. So they, back in 2013, they changed property taxes. So we went from commercial at 100% to 90%. And then at the same time, they put a limiter on residential and ag growth. They put it from 4 to 3. So you've lost, over the last 10 years, you've lost 10% of valuation on your residential property, which is a 10% hit on your bonding capacity, because residential is about 85% of the
Right.
basic.
That's why they get too worked up when you said we lost 150.
Yeah.
Commercial.
Yeah,
It's just not a big part of our portfolio.
for you guys, it doesn't matter as much, but that coupled with the last 2 years of inflation, we go back, I mean, for you guys right now to try to build the high school that you built. And,
Probably hit the one window that it would work.
yeah.
As it did.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
I
it
mean,
did.
you really hit it, because now there's districts trying to build high schools, and it's like, we're barely able to get there on ADM.
What do we spend on ours?
the full footprint's 30 million.
Yeah, I'd say 27 plus the extra 3 project they did later. That will be at least $60 million. Project. Although I will say, we did hear 2 good pieces of news this week, is that 2 projects came in under budget.
I've heard that on something else.
Yeah.
Some commercial business.
Stormlight came in under, Burlington came in under, so.
I think we're headed that way.
New buildings.
Yeah, I think we're headed that way. I think as long as interest rates keep going up, we're headed to think some more of that.
Well, we can't go from $250 a square foot to $450 a square foot. Not have some sort of adjustment.
And less tax.
Right. So good.
This is good stuff. I
Travis,
enjoyed it.
thank you.
This is great. Thank you, Travis.
Melissa, you have any questions? Sorry, we didn't have any handouts for you, I don't think, so.
That's all right. Nope, I had to step out for some conferences, so I missed a chunk in the middle, but
Okay.
I have a lot of questions.
I've got the 2 attorneys, Aaron Gale and Christine email about.
Okay.
so they-
Yeah, I'll send it over to you, Melissa.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Travis, appreciate it. All right, CMBA, you are up next with a facility master planning discussion. Oh,
Actually, they're not gonna present. They're just online. Sorry, you weren't here
Oh.
last meeting. They're just online available for questions.
perfect.
So we've been working together on and working on this is just ideas as it relates to options that are in front of you. There's, as we keep saying over and over and over, no decisions have been made, but what I'm excited about is to let you guys talk to each other about what your thoughts are as it relates to the options. What I tried to do is I started with about 43 million, I think, and just said, if I put together different packages of all the things we talked about, what does that look like? And that's why I talked to Travis earlier and sent this over and said, okay, here's our most expensive project. And so I'm going to just go through these really, really quickly with the different options, and then the feedback that I've received a little bit from principals or from our athletic director, and then just let you guys take it from there. So option 1, everybody, you either have it on your computer or it's also this red sheet in front of you. It goes down by each building. So elementary, that's it. Thank you very much. I'm pretty sure that's it. So you also have this map in front of you in case you need to reference that, but real quickly, the elementary building, if we went and built a new building, because there's been lots of different discussions about that and the difference in cost of a new building and a remodel and all that. That comes out as projected at 25.8. I'm just going to move really quickly. You can see the added classroom space, the new space, it would all be new. That leads us into the intermediate renovation and addition and a district office. I'm gonna come back to that in a minute because there's a new map in here for you to look at. And that's a new price also, which is 11 million. It's sort of an exciting, actually, let's just do it while we're there. If you go to the page 2, CMBA worked really hard. Oh, is this right? Yeah, but it's upside down, I think. Page 2, they made some changes of when I talked to you earlier about leaving the 6th grade over at the middle school. They squared up that wing to give that 5th grade and some flex space. The middle pink area there is the choir, the science, guidance and band. The office, so there's the entrance is the same. You go across those classrooms, 3rd, 4th is there, and then down off of the east gym, there would be renovation for a district office, which would include a boardroom, offices. We could potentially move kids zone. We've got some flex space down there. Troy's wanting a studio, FYI, for all of his podcasting, but I think I'm excited about this plan and the changes that they made. I think it looks really incredible, and it's $11 million. So I'm just going to keep going and we can come back and ask questions if that's okay. Then the middle school, what we talked about is adding in this option is just adding the classrooms and the new entrance, nothing else. The high school would be adding the science labs and renovating those classrooms and nothing else. And then this would allow for a transportation and maintenance facility. My own personal opinion on this is that it doesn't give us all of the things I think we really need. So it does provide a new elementary, which I like. It adds classrooms at all 4 buildings. That's a positive, but it doesn't add any gyms, doesn't move the track and field, locker rooms at the high school, no extension of the band room or commons in the middle school. So some limited factors there of all the things we've talked about. Okay, moving on to option 2. I'm going to go right on. Option 2 is if we renovated the elementary and did not build a new elementary. 17 million. If we did the changes I already shared with you, very similar with the intermediate, 11 million. Where we would add a few things at the middle school here, which would be adding classrooms, the entrance, and add the band room, and then track and field. And that puts it at 6.35. The high school gives us the new science rooms, renovating those classrooms, new gym, new locker rooms, and new training room. But it does not give us, so it has improvements on all of our buildings. This does not include any transportation or maintenance and no commons improvement in the middle school. And I have more to add about the middle school, but I'll just keep going and then I'll bring that back around. Okay, option 3. Option 3 is a renovation of the elementary instead of a new renovation, addition, and district office like we talked about for the intermediate, 11 million. At the middle school, it's adding classrooms, new entrance, and new track and field. That's at 5.5. And then new track and field, means moving the track and field. And then at the high school, it's new science classrooms, the renovated classrooms, a new gym and a new training room. And this does include the transportation and maintenance facility. So it's almost everything we're asking for, but there's no extension to the band room or commons at middle school and no locker rooms at the high school. And it's a reno, not necessarily new for the elementary elementary. And then the last one is option 4. This to me is almost the whole kitchen sink. This is the big dollars here, but I think it gives us a lot of things we've talked about. This is a brand new elementary building at 25.8. It's the reno and addition and district office like we talked about for the intermediate. This is the added classrooms at the middle school with the new entrance. It adds some extension to the band room. Now, there's some debate. This calls for a new gym at the middle school, but the middle school, that's kind of, I will tell you that this plan does not provide for moving the track. And I will tell you our athletic director is not in favor of not having the track because we're going to have to, he feels strongly that we need to keep the track. So we might want to trade out like the gym versus and Mr. Danielson feels differently. He wants the gym versus the track. So there's a lot of conversation around all the track or gym and all those things. And then in the high school, it gives us the new science rooms, the renovated classrooms, the new gym, new locker rooms, and the new training room. And this does add in the facilities, or I mean, the transportation maintenance. What it doesn't provide, down below, it says no transportation, that's an error, so you can take that off. This does add the gym at the high school, provides the new elementary, and just about all the things we've talked about. The only difference I see is in middle school, you might want to decide, we could decide, do we want the new gym or do we want the track and field if we decide we have to do either or? And then that leads us to the last page of your map package is your a la carte options. So what's not on here, you could see in all 4 plans, I didn't put in a weight room. Because based on our ideas about, it doesn't mean we don't need one, doesn't mean we don't want one. It's just when you start working on the money, classroom space is what's been our driving force. We tried to continue to keep the focus there. If you decide, like, for example, I thought at one point we had really said, gosh, we really like the idea of moving the track. Let's do that. That's just a switch. Maybe we don't do the gym at the middle school, but we put the track in because there's not enough funding, perhaps, for both. Yes, that is. Thank you so much, Jason. And so you can see there, if you decide like, gosh, we really want the band room. The other example I'll give you, Mr. Danielson had shared that he wasn't sure we needed anything done to the commons because it's fine. We can make that work. So maybe we want to do the band room and not, you can see the cost there. So I'll stop talking and answer any questions you may have.
Wow.
And that's why I talked to Travis to say, okay, if this is the project.
Yep.
This is the big one.
Is there a total, is this everything?
That's just everything. You can.
This is just if you want it, this is like an a la carte menu, you know,
Oh,
like if
okay,
you
got it,
just,
got it,
oh,
got
we
it,
want
got
the gym, not the that. Okay, we'll add 3.5. We want the weight room. Okay, add 2.7. You know, that's kind of what the point is of
I
that.
guess I'll jump on the first and maybe easiest conversation. Let's just do intermediate because it seems like across the board, it's a pretty much one option for intermediate.
Yeah.
Everybody take,
That's correct.
you don't agree, Tyler? So hit me with what your thoughts are, Tyler.
Well. All right, so let me just start by saying after the last board meeting I was at, Mike Esposette called and Josh and I had a call with him and he called just from the standpoint of, hey, construction, hey, funding, hey, these are things that I'm hearing you guys talk about and I think you should think about. And one of the key things that he said that he learned from the Ames was be careful not to throw new money at old buildings. Okay, so that was one thing, and I want to come back to that. Another thing he said was you really look at how many buildings you want to be running, right? So I don't mean to pump the brakes. I just want to put this out there before we go forward with whatever we're going to go. But he really got me thinking about, well, what are we doing here? Because I also went back then to what we did last time around, and I think that there's some information here that we might want to think about. Okay. And the other one I talked to was John Nelson, who was on the board for 8 years. And he works with Luke Deerdorf, who was also with the Ames school board. And Luke's strong recommendation was build new, be careful of getting into renovation projects, okay? So going back to the new money after old buildings, the last facility project that we did, Travis helped us with, we had a total of $14 million. And right here, of that 14 million, we spent 2.5 million on the intermediate and the elementary school on HVAC, electrical service. There was some fine arts renovation. But $2.5 million on those 2 schools for HVAC, which, how's that working, Stacy?
Well, they didn't change it all.
Yeah, we know that it's
They didn't
not.
change the heat pumps, which is probably caused us the biggest issue.
Yeah. So we spent 17.5% of that whole project on the old buildings, of which we didn't really get that resolved. And then when I look at, and I do appreciate the options, I mean, that's what we need to do. But it's really made me stop and reflect on how much money are we gonna spend on the oldest buildings in the district? Because if you go back to our data, I mean, this building is our oldest building, and it was initially built in 1959. With additions in 63, 67, 73, 74, 70, I mean, just, right? No wonder that the HVAC and all of that is a bit of a challenge. The next oldest is the Gilbert Elementary, 1974. Okay, so why I say, well, it seems like there's only one option for the intermediate. I'm just saying at this stage, before we go any farther, is that really the best option, that we invest in this building? And so new money after old buildings, I'm just throwing up a caution, especially with our experience in the last 10 years. As I look at the enrollment data, which I think we said, well, we're gonna go with this, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it is the elementary that goes up 63. No, 118 over the next 5 years, right? If you combine elementary and intermediate. And the high school goes up 80 and the middle school goes up 24. So as you kind of put all that together, my question is, well, is there an option where we build a new elementary right beside the current one? So not basically giving us the potential to have a pre-K through 4. The next phase would be, well, at some point, the middle school does advance in the second 5 years, it goes up another 70. So that's almost 100 from where it's at. Is there an option to then, on that relatively new building, to put 2 more pods or 2 pods of classes of grades? And you still have the flexibility. I'm going to be long gone, so I've got no skin in this game. Got no kids in the district, and I'm going to be off the board, but I'm just, so then you have the flexibility of saying, well, you still need capacity. Well, then don't tear this building down, but if otherwise repurpose this building or quit putting all the money into it. So is there an option other than just putting on another 8 or 10 classrooms on this building? I think there is, and that would be don't. That would require some additional considerations for where the classes and the grades would go.
Yeah. The only one thing I'll just add to that is just remember in all of our conversations, I kind of going back to the buildings with whatever that looks like for elementary, when you think about elementary, really, when you're putting together options, it may, you really kind of come down to new elementary remodel, but not based on based on what you're saying, it'd be elementary new, and then that impacts everything else because it takes such a chunk out of the budget. But that being said, remember, we all talked about a while ago how, the numbers of what we wanted to kind of keep the school as we grow. So if whatever that looks like, we have to keep that in mind of, what constitutes a small neighborhood school, if you will.
Yeah,
So
I'll be quiet.
on that point, so I agree. I think it'd be foolish to move forward and not say, hey, keeping 4 buildings with one of them being, kind of a conglomeration of a bunch of old additions wouldn't cost us more. I think going forward, we have to acknowledge it's probably going to nickel and dime us, but we already added on to the high school. And that was built as a new building. But I still think it's worth just culturally, our district has always been a quote unquote small district. And I think that's been the importance here. And we look at what can we do within our power to keep it a small district. We have no control over the growth, but we can physically structure that in smaller ways. That's why, even though I acknowledge it probably would cost more to keep 4 buildings, I still think culturally, I think it's going to be it's gonna better align us with our desire to be a small district. To be able, the way the grades are split out now, and I think I'd be willing to hear more, Ms. Edwards, what you have on that, because if we did that today, before all of the enrollment increases that we have, a pre-K 4 building would be 550 kids in one building. And that's today, that's not,
That's not growing.
5 years from now. So it does, having, some of the discussion we had, I think number you had said was 600.
Correct.
Based on your experience, that's when we no longer feel like a small school building. And that would be my concern, and that's where, like.
Yeah. So I guess my thought on that, and I'm not a principal. My thought on that is, we've been talking all along about pods. So for example, well, why couldn't the elementary be a 3, 4, and then a pre-K through 2 like it is now, but we build a brand new pre-K through 2. You leave the existing for 3. I mean, pods in two grade section, when Mike, you talked to us about that 2 meetings ago. About how, well, that actually worked best for the middle school. Back when it was originally built, you had pod here for 5th and 6th, and pod here for 7th and 8th, right? So I'm just throwing out, I think that can be accomplished, the small school in a pod setting, which you literally, what I described would be a pre-K through 2, a 3, 4, all on that elementary site. 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, you have a lot of building for middle school, but that could be phase 2
Yeah.
because of the enrollment. I mean,
So when you went through all that, Tyler, did you take the enrollment numbers into consideration when you looked at all that?
yeah,
Okay.
and most importantly is the timing of it, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, these are just forecasts, but that's what we talked about.
Right.
This new one gave us the first 5 years. Which then, as I mentioned, I mean, that's mostly in the elementary, so start there. And then the next 5 years, it's middle school, and that would be the opportunity, but.
Well, the only other piece I would say is that as you think about that, is that when you think about the numbers of the school as it grows, the
Yeah.
kids inside, whether it's pods or whatever that looks like, that impacts everything else, right? It impacts the amount of parking for parents when they come. It impacts every system, if you will, that for the district. The bigger the school building has kids, the bigger the impact is on the system. Doesn't mean it's good or bad. It just means it is there, and you have to plan for it and allow for that.
The other thing I think we need to make sure we take into consideration, and I'm not sure that we've gotten there yet, is traffic. Okay, and so the other thing that's just on my mind is if there's an opportunity to then put the extension of North 2nd Street in there. In the element, if you had a big elementary, big middle school, there's 2 ways to get there. Right, and there's been discussions now with the youth parks of consideration for actually going north of this building, which then could prompt the city into putting that street in there.
Melissa, what's your comments? She there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yep.
I'm still thinking. I'm really intrigued with what Tyler is saying. And I do agree that you can create a small school feel, even having more kids in one building. So I don't know. That's also just new. So I'm just kind of.
Yeah.
So Tyler, your theory is 3 buildings.
Eventually,
Yeah.
so
So
leaving this one as actually buffer capacity. I mean, if these are way off and we grow faster,
yeah,
you don't sunset it.
do you leave Christine and all her people here though to make it a office, or do you do away with it?
I think you have the opportunity for this to be the district office. I would not tear down any gyms
No, I agree,
and. Yeah. It's either buffer or classroom, kids club, whatever, or.
What does it cost us to run a building a year? I know they're not all the same.
I don't have that number.
Okay.
It depends, you're right,
Right.
it all depends on
Yeah.
the piece.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say too, though, to your point, Tyler, and just as we're processing all of it, is that, we have worked with CMBA and looked at all various options all along. And I really feel like we have been slowly narrowing as we've come forward. And I think, like just starting with the elementary, if the decision kind of to your point, Tyler, of that new is where we want to go, then maybe that's where we start to say, okay, we're either committing to a new elementary or we're not, and that impacts everything else. And then, because while we know that the intermediate does have 11 million to it, and it does have some issues, but a few of their issues, CMBA has been recommending, like if you look at that map of tearing down those locker rooms on the very end where the district office is and the stage, tearing some of that down just to make an entrance there, but still allows us, because our gyms are used constantly in this building, and that piece, I don't see that going away. I mean, no matter what happens to this building. And so,
Sorry,
go ahead.
which piece you're referring to?
Of the gyms, the use of the gyms,
Sure.
because we can't do with less gyms. We
Sure.
need more gyms,
Sure.
so even if you, in theory, slowly empty out this building and we say, well, we're going to keep it, we don't want to sunset it, you're still going to have to maintain it. You're still going to have things in here. You're still going to have, so I have a little like, oh, I don't know about that, just because, if you don't have a semi-full building, there's still going to be things we have to do to keep it live, if you will, if you want to call it that. We're still going to have the lights on. We're still going to have to. And so, and then I did ask Courtney at one point, which she's probably over there like, oh my gosh. I said, hey, what if we just said, okay, we want to build 2 new buildings. Do we have enough money for that? How much is that going to cost us? And she was like, I think you're crazy. So we didn't go there. But then you go to the middle school, which is one of our newer buildings. And what we're proposing to add there is, again, to Tyler's point of we're adding newness to one of our newer buildings with that match the enrollment. Because remember, we're going back to what we talked about is this is about making sure we're set with our future kids with the enrollment related to classrooms. Now, some of this, there's been a few pieces been added on as we've gone through that. But that's newness added to a newer building. That speaks to your point, Tyler. And then same thing at the high school. We're already at capacity, probably beyond capacity at the high school. What are we suggesting? Newness to the new building. So almost in every case, if we were to build a new elementary, we are doing that. We're putting money in the new buildings. Is it perfect with the intermediate? No, but it is utilizing our space in a way that we need, and maybe it's something that many years, I don't know when, but someday maybe, then they say it's time now to retire completely. This building goes away over time. I don't know. But I like the new plan that they provided. I thought it was a streamlined plan from the past one. It brought it down $2 million. So it was less money going into a already older building. So those are just my thoughts, and I'll be quiet and let you guys talk.
No, I think those are good, and I do agree, I think. Which is a change, so I think I apologize, but I mean, when I left a month ago, I was like renovation. But visiting with a few people, they're like, you're not exactly sure what you're gonna get into.
Right.
The Sawyer School was the example that was brought up from Ames, that they wished that they would have just built it new. Is the conclusion I heard. So, point being, I think there's common ground, potential common ground is build a new elementary. Where my head's at is immediately adjacent to without tearing down the old one.
I don't know if we have the room for that.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer to that. I mean, I really don't know.
Yeah.
You still have to have a playground.
The physical space exists, but we don't necessarily.
When I got in late one time and I said, I think what we need to do is build a new building, and I've kind of always believed that, and it gives us $28 million, right? 17 and 11. And we have plenty of land to do it. We have land out there. We can move the offices there. We can put our building anywhere. But Tyler's right, and so is Mike. I mean, when you tear into these old buildings, it's a disaster. I've owned old commercial buildings. And it's tough. Not impossible, but it's tough. I really like when I came here today and I saw this, I thought, this is okay, because our biggest question to Tyler's point is, do we really sunset on enrollment? That's the big question. Do we, what'd you tell me in 10 years? And I missed that meeting, in 10 years that we don't grow anymore. And that's a big concern. If we knew we were gonna keep growing up and up and up, we could change our thought processes.
But they also said within that, they really can't forecast after 10 years.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
They can
They-
do 0 to
yeah.
5, they can do 5 to 10 pretty darn well, and they just then it just kind of just.
I know. I mean, it's-
I agree, we don't know.
we don't know, but. Well, I don't know, Tyler, you got my head.
Well, it's something that. I'm visiting with Christine. I mean, it's not like we're gonna answer it today, right? It's a work session,
Mhm.
need to be continued. I mean, it's a puzzle.
It is.
And the thing that Travis has brought to us is we gotta be really prioritized with what we spend our money on. Cause it's limited.
I'd love to do this plan with new buildings.
Well, that's why
I
I
agree, new building. I want new.
That's why I
building.
asked Courtney, Courtney, could we do elementary and an intermediate? I mean, I did, I asked the question and she laughed at me, but that's okay. I still love you, Courtney.
I didn't laugh completely. I think we could do some things. You just might not get everything included in it, but
Thank you.
we can work that through.
Thank you.
And my thoughts on this, I mean, I agree with Tyler. I mean, I look at the elementary school and the money we spent on it, and then you still hear teachers and students complain there's no heat. I mean, that's an embarrassment. And so to go and add another 11 million, 7, whatever the dollar is, I don't care, it's a lot, to that building does not make any sense to me. It just doesn't. So my head right away goes to, I would much rather build new than to renovate that particular facility, just talking about the elementary. Now to go and create that to a PK through 4 building, I start to quiver just a little bit, because now all of a sudden, I just did quick math. I'm not an architect or an engineer, but you're looking at $35 to $40 million for that one facility. That's a significant commitment.
What's the assumption on that?
$340 a square foot, based off the dollars per square foot per classroom size and everything else. Again, I'm not saying that's right,
No.
but I figure it PK through 2 is 26 million.
So I'm saying the current building sits there
Oh, I don't like that.
and you use it.
Yeah. I don't know if I like that.
If you build a new one. You've got that capacity. You haven't sunset anything yet.
Yeah. Well, if we're they're in the intermediate, we've always said we're gonna keep because of the gym. Well, we're keeping this no matter what. Elementary, in my mind, there's nothing there that I think we want to keep, how I look at it. I mean, the gym's
Slide
crap. Slide Mountain, we want to keep.
Now, let's not make any promises. We'll see.
No, I agree with you.
But I look at that, I mean, the cafeteria is not great, the gym's not great, classrooms, there's no one in there that said those are great. So I look at that part like, well, if there's nothing there that we really want to keep, or we're here, we've all said the gym's great, we're keeping the gyms. Well, we know we're keeping this thing, we're not knocking this down. And I would rather knock that down, again, I'm just talking out loud here.
Sure.
And just build new there, but with the intermediate part here. Kind of back to the kind of the common topic here is, why throw more money into old? How can we do a wing here, knowing that maybe in 10 or 15 years, we want to, we want to knock the rest, a portion of it down. Because this layout, I think is awesome, because it's $11 million, but we're adding a ton of parking, we're adding more roads in and out, we're adding more space, and I think it'd be a great layout for a future school. Now, again, a lot of this is very old, 1959, 60. But again, if we were to design it or add on to say, okay, in 10, 15 plus years, it's ready, this part could be demolished and then added onto this new wing with new mechanics, new HVAC, which we already have kind of established over there. Then we're not I don't want to say wasting money, it's not the term, but we're not putting money to an old building. We're adding on a new building to an old building, knowing that down the road, we may add another wing to this. That's how I would look at it, because I love this layout of the intermediate. I think it's really, really cool. It's right in the heart of town. I want to keep the elementary where it's at. I think we've talked about that in the past. We love that community elementary school field with the kind of the ball fields behind it, this homes and all that kind of surround it. I love that facility too. And again, I'm not even getting into middle school and high school yet, but that's where my head is on both of those. I don't want to put any more money in elementary because I don't know what we keep there, why we keep throwing more money there. And I would just rather just tear that thing down and then build that new. But again, if we spend money here, it needs to be the right money, knowing eventually it's not gonna be here for a long term. I don't know if that's possible. But I do like the district office where it's at. I think that's kind of cool.
Where's that at over on that?
Yeah, right there next to, you can watch the roundabout all day. It's
What I liked about that is that, if you remember the previous plan, we didn't really have a plan for those spaces, and now this is. Allows us to move up there, gives us our own entry and tears down kind of an area that's really no longer needs to be here, which is the locker room,
Is the gym still there?
and yep, the gym's still there. And then it also can put in where we can block it off for the families, the community and the weekend.
yeah, the gym, the community could be a community space.
Yes,
They-
they're so good, John.
Your kids were at the light today.
They were wonderful. They were wonderful.
My kids never could have done
I
it.
know, they were so good. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
See ya. That's
Yeah,
right.
no, it's unbelievable.
Good job.
Yeah, but Mario's?
Yeah, we're good.
Bunch of half-eaten ones.
Yeah. That's good too.
But I'll also, we've had no discussion on the high school, so I'll just talk about that for a little bit here. I mean, again, I think gymnasium is a must in my mind. I think it's something we need. Again, the weight room, I know we've talked about it. It may not be an option. That's fine. I mean, it'd be a nice have, but it doesn't work budget wise or space wise. It's a someday. We could always assume. In the science lab we talked about, the second story addition down the road, whether it be phase 2 or even a different phase down the road. Again, we've got room to grow there. Again, that one seems pretty easy and there's not a lot going on, which is good.
So that kind of, I mean, what I'm hearing, Andrew, is that, yeah, option 4 that Christine.
Yeah, I gotta look back to where it. Yeah, option 4. I mean, the transportation and maintenance facility, I mean, to me, that is a phase 2, maybe even beyond that we kind of push aside even on that side.
There need to be.
Well, it depends what you-
Travis is another. $8
Yeah,
million.
well, it depends how you do it, because you're
Yeah.
gonna use that space up, so if you demolish that area, that's gonna make it, it's gonna push it to the beginning of the project, that's just however we do that, so. However the process is.
And Courtney, I guess the question for you is on that intermediate, that extension, I mean, how would that look again, just hearing this conversation and I'm not fast forward in 10, 15 years. If we did a new wing there kind of on the north side where that, what is it, the 5th grade
Yep.
classroom is?
Mhm.
I mean, is it a possibility? Because again, we all love the gym. That's not going anywhere for a long time. To be able to someday then pretty much redo the other whole part of the building and have like a new school, is that a possibility?
Yeah, you're talking at the intermediate site to
Yes.
build with what we just did new and then go kind of up to the north.
Yeah, or even just knock down all the south and redo all that. I mean, I know what I'm talking about here, but
The 3rd and 4th.
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, eventually if we decided, hey, that 3rd and 4th, this is a junk, it's not working, we're having all sorts of problems. I mean, what could we do there to make all that new someday?
Especially knowing that if we put the district offices off in the corner there too. Can that be torn off?
Yeah.
Or would that be a new thing?
yeah.
The one piece you'll want to consider is wherever you build, you don't want to displace all your students. So building to the north where nothing is right now would be the most viable because you can build while students are still using the building.
Yeah.
If you wanted to replace where 3rd and 4th grade is right now, we would have to find a way to displace them tear down and build and then bring them back. So out of any of the options, I think you're always going to want to keep that in the forefront of what we're displacing, how long we're having to displace students, and what is the best kind of solution around that. So that would dictate how we would do the North Edition and have that kind of next step in place in the design process so that we know this can be activated if we decide we don't want to do the southern, half of it, and we want to continue on, so that we're not limiting ourselves in the future for growth in a different direction.
Yeah.
So Courtney, if I look at that map, I'm looking at that special education room with the 4th grade right under it, and almost like drawing a line from there all the way north. I could see that someday. Again, I have no architectural background, FYI, is that if all that went away, then you would have that whole gym would stay, the new wing of 5th grade, and then you could build north from there, and still you could make that other area playground and parking or something like that over time if you needed to. Is that?
Yeah. And that was always
feasible?
kind of that plan when we, first started options. That was one of those things that you took off the eastern oldest part, you
Mhm.
replaced it so that you could always backfill then with playgrounds and parking lots. Same with you guys talking about like the elementary school. If you built new on that site behind so that you didn't displace students, then when you were done, the understanding would be that you would be able to gain back parking and playgrounds over space that you were holding until you had a new building to transition. So it's always the game of being able to keep students in school doing what they need to in their classrooms with little disruption, and then being able to move over and backfill in the things that don't affect them as much.
And the beauty of this building, whether it be old or not, the classroom sizes are they're big classrooms here.
They're
I mean,
big classrooms.
They fit, when you walk in classroom, they fit these classes very, very well. And again, I get it, it's older too, but there's a lot of space in this building. All right, other comments, questions? What else do we have on our minds here? I mean, I guess the track. We
Yeah,
were talking
that's the
about
one I
track.
wanted us to talk about. So the conversation we've had is that we've talked in different meetings about the track. Obviously is no longer usable as it is, and potentially moving the track over to the middle school. In a conversation that we've had, and then in one of the options, there was build a middle school gym. And then there was, well, is there money for all of that? And so then it became a conversation of, well, do we even need a middle school track, if you want to call it that? And so there was that conversation, and then we said, well, maybe we should just do the track. Maybe we should just do the gym and not have the track. And then I had a conversation with Ian, and he said, we have 150 kids, and Mike, I don't know how much you want to share there, but 150 some kids that do track every season that are middle schoolers, and we have a lot of youth sports that use the middle field, the football field. I think there might be soccer practice on there sometimes, if I'm correct. And so we know another gym is a need, but we also know that not having a track, I mean, we do have gyms, and if we don't do anything with this track, then we are not going to have a track for our middle schoolers, and that could create its own problem. So I think you all
Do we
need to
ever-
discuss that.
Do we ever host any middle school events?
The high school stadium.
And we use that, and that seems to be
Yes.
fine that day.
Yes, there's just no room for
So there's no
practice.
Practice.
Track.
There's no, and so then there was a,
Tyler walks his dogs there.
Yeah.
We got.
Cinder would work fine.
That's what I grew up on. I was gonna ask that
Track.
question, but
Yeah.
I'm sure that's an old.
And again, we could keep track, but it needs work done. I mean, it's not like either way, we either gotta put money into
I
it.
don't even know.
No,
I mean, last time we did,
Yeah.
it's like you've done it for the last.
so many
Okay,
times.
So it's pretty much tear it out,
It's
redo it,
Yeah.
or move it.
It also interferes again with kind of some of this new build. That's why it was recommended that we move it
Yep,
over.
yep.
That the kids using it are over there. We got to redo it anyway, move it over there. So that was kind of the talk, if I remember correctly. But the question becomes, I guess the conversation for all of you is, if you had to choose, and I'm not suggesting one or the other, but if you look at my options here, it's either my options that I selected either included a gym or it would include a track, but the budgeting of 54 did not include both.
And
A
again,
gym at the middle school.
Ian's comments for the track were just a need because of all the kids
Yeah.
out for middle school kids out.
He
for
was
track.
very concerned. One of the things that Mike had shared, and Mike, you feel free to, jump in here, but that, he had made, I thought, a very logical argument, I guess, about that, we don't use that track a lot. Track season doesn't last a long time, and we use basketball gyms or gyms all the time. And so that made sense to me. And I thought, okay, that sounds pretty good. And this is why it's important we have these conversations. Well, then I talked to Ian, and he was very concerned because he said we have, we may not use it a ton, but we won't have a place for our middle school kids to practice, and then they'll have to run through the streets of the city, and that's not safe and not good and blah, blah, blah. Now, he also shared, and we've talked about this, that we don't need a performance track. We need a practice track with a football field in the middle, a modified, so people can practice. So those are some of the conversations I've heard from various people, and I'll let you guys hammer that out.
Middle school track's about 7 weeks. Once we
Yeah.
start, because we don't practice Wednesdays, it's used once or twice. Oh, once or twice a week during those 7 weeks, once the meets start. When I was talking about the second gym, I mean, because of volleyball, basketball, both seasons, we typically have one team practice over here. We do use 2 gyms now. It's just kids have to run over here to practice. We often have games over here as well and have both gyms going here. And then I've obviously with PE, when you look 10 years down the road, forecasted that I have 500 kids at the middle school, and so to me, if in terms of what dollars impact kids the most, the dollars for the second gym would. It'd be used athletically for volleyball, basketball, those 3 seasons. It'd be used for PE, whereas the track would be used. And I understand what Ian's saying, and I'm not saying I don't want a track. I do, I'd love to have it all. Most middle schools that have their own track, it's similar to what we did. It's a hand-me-down when the high school got a new stadium. The difference is we didn't invest 15 years ago in this one when we needed to. But nobody's building new middle school tracks. I mean, that's just because it's not, you're not gonna host events, not.
And it's for practice. I mean, those 7 weeks, it's for practice.
Yeah, I mean, well, currently, yes. I mean, is it possible we could have events there depending on the facility that's built? I suppose, but right now, just because, yeah.
What do other schools do that don't have 2 tracks? I mean, we can't be the only school in state. Iowa
What
that
Ian had,
tracks.
I don't know what other schools do, but the only thing Ian had shared with me is that it impacts practice in the sense of, then you have to schedule practices, which then pushes everybody's evenings later because you can't come to practice all this time and that. And I mean, I don't know. So I don't know. I'm assuming that's what other schools must
That
do.
would be in that case, they
You
don't
know.
have a middle school track. They're building a new high school stadium, I think. If I'm not mistaken, so they will. North Polk uses the old high school, I know. Monterey uses the old high school, I know, because they have new football facilities. I could reach out to Ballard. I don't know what they do for track, but I know they don't have a middle.
They
school.
don't have another track, and their stadium isn't
Yeah.
immediate, so they're trying to solve that problem.
Jason, Ian's not online.
Yes, he is.
Oh, maybe he'd like to speak. Hey, Ian. Let you speak for yourself. I didn't know he was on there.
Well, he's only on here in theory.
Yeah.
I have a question too. If we build a new elementary school, could we build a gym on that could accommodate some of these needs instead of building another gym at the middle school?
I think the issue comes that you can't send PE class over there. I mean, I think that's, am I right? The issue comes
Yeah,
to
and it would
PE.
be
It's the
practice.
transportation of kids.
Practice, because right now they just run basically across the parking lot here for volleyball and basketball. That would be even. You'd have to
Build a
bus them then.
Big gym with an indoor track.
That's right. Ian, is Ian there? Ian, do you
Yeah,
want
are
to
you-
share about track?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I completely understand Mike's point of view and totally respect. A second gym at the middle school would be amazing as well. But I just feel like there's just such a need for the track because we have so many kids that are signed up, and I can understand Mike's point too, that's only used for a short period of time. But if we didn't have a track at the middle school, I think it would almost eliminate the middle school track program because those kids, I don't even know. I'm trying to, workshop how to when or how those kids would practice. And with the amount of stuff that happens at the high school stadium after school in the spring, it's already a logistical nightmare with soccer and track. And then you add 140 middle schoolers on top of that. I don't see how it would work. And so I don't know when or how those kids would practice, and it it really difficult for the middle school track program to exist. And then, then that ends up hampering our high school program. So I'm just advocating for that track. And as Dr. T said, it doesn't need to be a competition track. It can be, I think we would need to research and make it a 6-lane track with a more durable surface. It doesn't need to be a high performance, competition surface. It's just something that the kids are safe, it's durable, and it allows them to, do their practice in the spring before we host our competitions at the high school. So that's my 2 cents on the middle school track.
And to clarify, I'm not advocating against the track, please understand, I'd love to have it. I'm just, if you're trying to decide what's the best use of dollars in terms of impacting kids, that's where I was coming from.
Yeah,
Standpoint, so.
absolutely, Mike, and I completely understand.
So let me ask you this, would you rather have a track or a gym? Serious, if it came down to you two guys. You want to have,
We're split on that. I would say, if you're looking to impact the most amount of kids, I'd say the gym, I think you'd say the track.
I think he's saying athletically, we need a track, and I think he's saying just from a day-to-day classroom, we need the gym.
Yep.
So,
And I completely agree. Yeah,
Ian's right in that we have a strong number of participants in all sports. We have, no cut policy. But if you look at the middle school getting to 500, like how many basketball teams will we have at that point? When we have 5 teams that need to get on the court, for 7th grade, right now we're at 4. And gym space, so anyway.
I like the idea of researching what would be the least inexpensive track, given how it's used today, right? Water. Thank you. I mean, I joke about cinder, but that probably is not safe, considered safe.
no,
I survived, but I wasn't a world class athlete.
What if I told you guys stretch your plan out a couple more years and you have more money? You change what you did?
Can we do
Well,
private
but-
funding on some of this too? I mean, if we went out and did private funding for maybe I mean, again, I just look at some of the, and I'm not saying we will, but.
Yeah. I like the idea of the staging and the phases, Travis, but it's interesting how they all are so connected, right? So.
Yeah.
If we did
Not
is being proposed, put on that addition to the north of this building. That compromises that track right there.
away.
Right? So then you need it then.
I think we're adding, I look at the gym almost as we can push that down the road because we're adding a gym at the high school.
Correct.
Right out of the chute. We're keeping the gyms here in this building. So we're +1 no matter what. And then if we decide down the road that we want to add a gym in the middle school, at least we leave a spot for it and do that. Not within the first phase or maybe even phase 2.
okay.
I think that could be pushed in my mind.
So how do we leave here, Andrew? How do we?
Happy.
Yeah,
Spring break.
I know, right?
Spring break.
Right. Not everybody took last week off and said we had the flu. So
Last week?
We had.
This week.
What about last 3 months?
Oh.
Sorry.
I'm not saying I had the flu, just for a week off. How do we, do we tie the two together with Travis and say, do our buckets only make a difference on, say if we want X amount of dollars on one, and that'll affect the rest of them, I'm sure. Or is there a limit on bucket 1 versus, you know what I mean? I guess we gotta have some information from him.
Yeah, bucket 1 is the. Probably the biggest limit through 26, which is like that 45 million. And then beyond that. Depending on how you want to chunk it, so I gave you, basically, we went through the summer of 29 on spending money. And I gave you what, 59 million?
Yep.
We go through the summer of 31. And we get a little bit more aggressive on the sales tax. So meant to getting this facility done. Maybe increase your payments to about 1.8 million when you get out to a few years later. I can take this to 74.
No, I think we're 54. 54. I hope.
No, I'm saying some of those things on your list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that gym.
Within the 10 year.
Yeah, with adding this,
Yeah.
5 million for each of those years that we.
So maybe we do the track and then the gym right behind it, or do the gym and the track right behind it.
Or
I mean-
consider private funding for the track as that outdoor athletic thing. I mean, the thing, I totally agree, and I mean, you're the wizard with the numbers, Travis, but I caution us, let's be really careful, because what we're deciding here in March of 2023 could compromise spending for 20 years. Yeah. Which, you know, just so I like the conversation we've been having. But I mean, we're not gonna be able to do everything. Not every building's gonna be able to have all this stuff, and we gotta, I'd caution not to. Well, how much can we spend? That's not really the question. It's
Yeah.
what should we be spending it on?
This really isn't anything different than you guys did 10 years ago when you said, hey, we're gonna add on to these buildings, but let's not do anything that compromises us from being able to do that. You know, at that time, we just threw new elementary in 15 to 20 million. So that was always in the back
Yeah.
of the mind. Well, I think that's still there, right? You just gotta consider the buckets. And you don't have to make these priorities, but you could. I mean, you could set a path forward for the next 10-year of improvements. It's a little bit harder when you start going out that long because you don't know enrollment. You know, that's gonna be oh, well, now we need more classroom spaces. Well, maybe we should have spent money on a gym. You know, those things come back to.
Or it could go the other way.
Right, I mean, we could have spent more money 6 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And like I said at the beginning, in retrospect, there's a couple things that I wish we wouldn't have spent it on.
Well, one of the things I would propose is that kind of based on the feedback I'm hearing from everyone, I could potentially, based on what you guys want me to do next, is take the feedback that I've received today and heard from everyone, and then work with CMBA on that. And then also this time maybe work with Travis, and we could maybe come up with scenarios related to the buckets and the projects, if you wanted to look at it that way. And that will give you even more of a crystal clear, more clear picture of, you know, like what I heard today is, I'm hearing mostly, I know we're not voting on anything, it's just a discussion, but you know, I'm hearing a discussion about, we like the idea of a new build and looking at that reno so that we could, for the intermediate, so that we could build in the future. You know, feeling good about some of the pieces related to middle school and high school and put those into buckets and figure out the transportation maintenance piece. So then you can look at that at a meeting and see if that can help us narrow. Is that what, would that be helpful?
Yeah, I think so. And like Tyler said, listen, when talking to Mike's a big deal. You know, he's out there and he's done a lot of this stuff. So I think we should use some of that, his knowledge, and we're probably should head toward us.
Well, again, I mean, just a quick comparison, you know, we're gonna spend 17 million to redo it or spend 25 million to build it new. I mean,
Or we could spend 27 million. I mean, you know, it just doesn't make any sense.
yeah.
So.
Well, again, today's just a work session, so we're not, there's nothing we're gonna, I think it's a good discussion. I think there's a lot of ideas thrown out there.
I do want to comment, I really liked how it worked to, I would ask, are we kind of in consensus that a new elementary versus renovating?
What?
Because I was in the others camp when we left last time.
Let me ask that to Melissa, since she's been online.
Yeah.
Melissa, before we comment on that, which elementary side, new versus reno, what's your thoughts?
Oh, I think new is the way to go.
Okay. Well, there you go. And I think that's where I'm at. Josh, where are you at?
I like new, but I don't like buildings with more than 600 kids in them.
Okay.
And that's based on, I think, a lot of it. You know, that's the. We can save all the money we want, but it's, you know. There has to be a purpose for saving the money.
Yeah, but they have limits. They give us numbers for how many we can have per building, square foot and all that stuff. So that helps us too.
Yeah.
You know, we're under, I think, on all their buildings.
That'd be the thing. Make sure it's, you know, distinct, because that is truly one of the things that is the greatest draw here. So as long as we don't lose that, you know.
I think I can tell you that Ankeny used to build 500 to 600 student elementaries, and now they build 750 student elementaries. Right? They figured out with their design how much more efficient it was, and they weren't losing a lot on the field. So I think when you look at the design, I think that can help, because I think some people alluded to that I don't think the 600 always holds as true, but I think getting your footprint down, the number of your HVAC systems down. Helps in the long run, as you figured out, like,
That was the commentary that's said. I mean, our personal experience, our kids were in Greensboro, North Carolina before we moved here. Thankfully, glad we moved here, but they were in an elementary school with 1,000 kids. And it felt like Gilbert. It was how it was laid out. It was how the teachers interacted. It was the culture of the building.
I think,
It wasn't 400, 300, 200.
Wasn't driven by
1,000.
numbers. Yeah.
No,
I think it'd be, if you tried to footprint an older building.
yeah.
With, and made those and add additions to it, you're gonna definitely feel small. I think if you can start with the blank footprint that this is 400, but it'll become 600. You'll build your common spaces so that, you know, it'll feel that way, your corridors will feel that way, it'll be a different feel, but. Again, you have to design right, because otherwise, yeah, you will not feel like it, or you'll feel like something different. So I think points are good.
I do think space in that neighborhood will be big. We barely, I mean, at parent pickup time right now, the cars are out on Matthews. So I think logistically, I'm not sure how many more
Cars.
That's the whole.
We're
traffic
across,
thing,
we're
right?
across the street, because I'm usually last in line, so I know that.
Cause I taught you,
Yeah.
Well, we have plenty of land.
right, but it's very.
We have plenty of land.
Yeah.
Well, and for the running the cost of the building, what I do know, in my past experience is that when you drop below. You know, it's your really small elementaries when they have 200, 250, that's when it gets very costly for the district to run that type of it. So moving up to 350, 450, 550, it balances out better when of what it costs to run a building and the people that are inside. So it fits a lot of things related to that, but.
I'd like to know more if we get numbers on the cost of running our existing buildings,
Yep.
and then maybe some comparable buildings that have been built in the last couple years.
Sure, I'll see what I can do.
And can you run the school too while you do all this other stuff?
I'll be out on out with the buses. That happened like today, and call a snow day in the middle of it all.
Anything else for discussion today during our work session? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
further discussion. All those in favor to adjourn the meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.